We change other people's behavior by changing our own. Hello, MSA family, community, and friends. I'm Jimmy O'Brien,
I'm Marissa Eck.
And I'm Aisha Lee.
and welcome to the Behavior Beacon newsletter number 5. This is going to be a very special edition. It's going to be a little bit longer than usual. And in this content, we're going to be talking about dealing with some challenging behaviors. And there's going to be different sections. There's going to be 5 different sections that we're going to go over with you. So I'll hand it over to Marissa.
All right, everyone. So we're going to be talking, like Jimmy said, of how to deal with some challenging behavior at home. We do have a special note in here. The following suggestions that we're going to go over are not, and I repeat, are not for severe, dangerous, or self-stimulatory behavior. For those types of behaviors, we would likely need to come up with a more in-depth analysis for you and for your family, or if we were at school, with an individualized function-based treatment plan. And we would oversee that. So if you feel that that is necessary, please contact us and we will help you through that. So moving on, welcome to our 5th newsletter, dealing with some challenging behaviors at home. In our past newsletters, we have attempted to explain some of the basic principles with you guys of human behavior in order to give you some sort of foundation for this behavioral way of thinking, which is how we think on the behavior service team. We thought starting there was important for a number of reasons. Firstly, for you guys to understand these basic principles, it will make you a more informed and empowered parent, which is a huge goal for us. Secondly, it will allow you to understand and see why we, behavior analysts or behavior assistants, might suggest one thing over another. Thirdly, this will allow you to become more confident since you will be doing this at home. And you will know why we recommend things and how to then recommend them for yourself in your own contexts. Sometimes people have the tendency to throw the kitchen sink, as we say, at an issue, which means throwing kind of everything at it. And that can be really overwhelming and confusing and oftentimes contradictory. For an example of that, it would not be recommended to ignore challenging behavior if the payoff or consequence was to escape a task. We'll dive into that a little bit more as we go on, so it makes a little bit more sense. But this is an example of things that might be contradictory as far as recommendations go. Another example would be also trying to explain or talk to a child during a tantrum that might be attention maintained, like they want your attention, would not be recommended in those contexts. And we are going to dive into what those contexts are as we move forward. So I'm going to hand it off to Aisha here.
Okay, guys, so in this issue, we'll be describing some of the general situational scenarios that are typically evocative for challenging behavior. And some of these include, my child wants something that I'm willing to give them, but they're engaging in challenging behavior right now. My child wants something that they cannot have. My child wants something that they have to wait for, and they're engaging in challenging behavior. My child doesn't want to do something I've asked, as well as I have no idea, it just happened out of nowhere. For each of these scenarios, we will be describing the learning history. How did it get learned? Proactive strategies, which is how to prevent these things from happening. Reactive strategies, responding to problem behavior, how we respond to it. Adaptive strategies, which are replacing problem behaviors, and some special considerations on what to expect during all of this.
Thanks, Aisha. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with the tips of the week only because this will then help frame the different contextual or situational factors. There's going to be 5 different ones. So as we go through this, here's what we want you to remember as we go through each one of these scenarios. 1, keep in mind that every behavior has a function, even if it occurs out of the blue. In behavior analysis, as a science, we believe that behavior is lawful. It's deterministic. Things happen for a reason, whether that's in the external environment or their internal environment. There are reasons why our learners do, or even ourselves do what we do. The second thing is pause before you react. In other words, before you're about to do something during challenging behavior or preventing it, take a pause, take a deep breath. And what you're trying to do there is number 3 is determine the contextual or situational factor that you're in. Understanding what context you are in will determine just very exactly what you need to do. In certain contexts, you will be paying attention to your learner. In other contexts, you might not. You might be even walking away. So it's very important to pause, assess, and then you'll know what to do in those particular things. Reach out to the behavior service team during these episodes. If you feel like, one of the special considerations that we'll talk about is that when behaviors no longer work or the payoff is not forthcoming, it will have a tendency to get worse before it gets better. It actually means it is getting better, but it can be very uncomfortable. We certainly recommend to call us, to reach out to us, Zoom us, and we will work you through some of those difficult times if you hit a level of uncomfortability. Also, lastly, if you're in a context or a situation that doesn't apply to what we're going to outline, then immediately, again, contact the behavior service department, and we will go through with you, which is actually known as a functional behavioral assessment, where we can actually devise for you in a very specific, individualized intervention plan. Okay, so that's a lot to digest. Let's get started. You asked your child to do something. You asked them to transition from one thing or another, and now that's creating challenging behavior. So let's first do analysis. How did we get here? How does this get learned? What is the learning history for your child who has issues with transitional things, or when you ask them to do something? So let's kind of frame it using our ABC kind of model, our motivation signals, what we say and do, and what the payoff is. So let's kind of take that through. So think about the antecedent there, right? Your learner is asked to do something. Now, what is it that they're asked to do? During transitions, it's usually two things, right? It's one, it's usually some termination of a fun activity. And two, it's asking them potentially to do something that they might not want to do. So you have these two kind of factors operating at the same time, right? So once you've terminated one activity, which will now increase the value of getting that thing back. And two, now you might be asking them something that they don't want to do, which now increases the value of getting out of it. So you got these two things already operating, that getting the item back would be really a good reinforcer or payoff, and getting out of it or even postponing it would be a good consequence or payoff or reinforcer. Second thing is when there's a person, place, or thing, either a parent or a caregiver or even a sibling who is around, the learner has learned that when they engage in some type of challenging behavior, what usually happens? What has been the payoff under those situations or contexts? Well, usually someone does the following. They either give them back that which they just took away. They might say something like, whoa, 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 it looks like you're not ready. Here's a little bit more time. Or they might postpone or allow the individual to escape. We'll wait until you're ready. It seems like, you're not ready to do this. And as a result, what happens is there might be a brief cessation of the aversive activity, if you will. Now, what's the final result of all of that? Now, the learner is basically going to do the exact same thing under future circumstances. So that's how our learners come to the table with some of this, with this history. So now let's talk about some strategies. Let's talk about proactive strategies, reactive strategies, and adaptive. So as I go through this list, this is not an exhaustive list. These are kind of your bare bones minimum. It certainly does not mean you have to follow these, but what we want to do is give you some general ideas of some suggestions. Some I might pinpoint a little bit more as more important than others. So here we go. So proactively. So what do you do to either prevent or be more proactive for your learner who doesn't like to have things interrupted and or go to things? Well, the first thing we'd like you to do is consider the transition, right? Remember, a transition is a movement from one environment to another. We will all have transition problems depending on where I'm going from. For example, if I'm going from something highly preferred to something less preferred, chances are I'm going to have a transition problem. I might negotiate, I might grovel a little bit, I might try to get out of it. But if you're going from something less preferred to something highly preferred, typically there will be no transition. So we want you guys to think about is, what are those activities, what are those daily transitions where your learning is willing to go, and I'm sure it's from a low to high, versus from high to low, those things that typically are evocative. So if you think about a lot of our Zoom sessions, what usually happens? The learner's at home, they're sitting down, they're playing with their favorite thing, they might be on the iPad, and now because it's 10 o'clock and it's time to have OT now with Lindsay, mom might say, well, this is finished and now it's time to go to OT with Lindsay. And now what happens? So we want you guys to be cognizant of that. So once you consider that transition, you're in a better place to make a determination of what might you do if you're going from something low to high. So if you're in a situation where you're going from something low to high, no problem. But if you're going from something highly valued to less valued, here's some things we would suggest. Well, one, you can use a promise reinforcer or some incentive system. That is, you can, from the high to the low, you can have them bring the item that they currently have with them, so you're not terminating it. Or what you're trying to do, you're trying to find, can I take something that would be really valuable, really strong, and equate it with the activity that is less preferred. And that's why we talk about token systems, or some of the families we've asked, can you find that one reinforcer that you're only going to use for this particular thing? And what we're basically saying is, can you take that high preference reinforcer and put it with the low to give it more motivation, so that when the learner has to go, they are much more likely to go. You can give a warning. There has been some research that says giving a child a warning has been helpful. I probably wouldn't spend too much time on it, developing it. A simple warning, like a countdown, could be helpful. It's typically helpful for those individuals who are very anxious about not knowing what's next. So if your learner is very uncomfortable or anxious about what's going to proceed, I would certainly say give a type of warning. If your learner is someone who doesn't care about what's coming next, but just wants to hold on to the reinforcer, chances are the verbal warning won't even work. If anything, it will trigger even more challenging behavior. So again, if your learner is anxious about what's coming next, provide a verbal warning. That'd be great. If not, you're just going to follow these other preventative strategies. Another one is look for signs of disinterest before you terminate an activity. The other day I was in a Zoom session, and when we got onto the Zoom session, the learner was already in a challenging behavior. And what happened was, just before the Zoom session started, the learner was watching their favorite video, and it was terminated just in the middle of the video. Now, the video was only about 5 minutes long, but halfway through it, it was terminated. So what could have been a more proactive strategy is take a look at it. Are they in the beginning? Are they in the middle? Are they in the end? And what you might want to do for those particular situations, let the learner finish it. Let them finish it out, so that when it's time to say, let's go over here, they're much more likely to come. So watch for signs of disinterest. If your learner's playing with a particular toy, you might kind of look a little bit at them. You're saying like, well, are they really engaged with it? If they're really engaged with it, chances are, if you ask them to transition, they're going to have a problem. But if they play with it a few extra minutes, you kind of let them satiate a little bit, get full of it, you might be in a better place to terminate it. Okay. And again, those are just some general strategies. It's not an exhaustive list. We would certainly say reach out to your other disciplines who might have some other good preventative or proactive strategies. All right, so now let's get into it. How do you react in situations in which now you're in it? You've asked for the learner to do something, and now they're in it. How do you react to challenging behavior? So before I even get started, what we're going to be basically introducing to you guys is a new principle we haven't talked about, which is called extinction. So extinction basically means that a reinforcer is no longer forthcoming. In other words, the behavior doesn't pay off. And as a result of not paying off, you might get this tendency for the behaviors to get worse before it gets better. So in all these reactive strategies, we're gonna caution you by saying it has the potential to get worse. Okay. So here's what we say to do in those particular situations. First thing is stay calm. The way you respond has the potential to be associated with what you're going to do in the future. So stay calm, take a deep breath, Understand that you're in this particular context, and what you're trying to do is not allow now the reinforcer or the payoff to occur. So if it's getting back the item, they're not going to get back the item. If it's to get out of the task, we're going to teach them that this behavior will not get them out of the task. So you stay calm. Try to stay within arm's reach if you can, because we might talk about blocking and preventing the learner from going in different directions. If possible, block all access to those reinforcers. If you took something away, what you want to continue to do is to remove it. Once they grab it, remember, that's the reinforcer. So you have to control it, right? Challenging behavior is not going to get you for this. If your learner engages in minor aggression or minor self-injury or property destruction or property harm, try to block and prevent. All the while you're asking yourself, is this hitting a critical mass for me that's too uncomfortable? If it becomes uncomfortable, immediately call your behavior service team and we will walk you through it. Try to avoid eye contact. Now, why do we say avoid eye contact? People who reinforce us are the ones who look at us. So we, in a sense, what we want to do is signal to the learner, this behavior will no longer work with you. So we want to make our body posture, the way we speak, very salient to the individual to indicate this behavior will no longer be reinforced. We then say, keep the demand going. It's called the keep it going intervention, if you will. Keep the demand going every few seconds or so, or every few minutes or so, whatever that might be. What you don't want to do is you don't want to nag the child and keep saying, you got to do it, you got to do it. In a sense, you standing there, not allowing them to get access to it and kind of standing your ground, if you will, is an indication that the demand is still in place. So in a very calm, collected voice, you're going to gotta go neutral. And if it's time to take a bath, you might say, it's time to take a bath. It's time to take a bath. And now what you're trying to do in your head is just trying to be as calm as possible, using your voice in a way that means you mean business. So it's time to go, time to take a bath. It's time to take a bath. If you feel comfortable, we would say is if you can physically guide the learner to it, don't make it a power struggle. If you feel you're providing way too much mechanical output, then stop. You'll know your own comfortability. And then as your learner starts to move, your facial expression should change. You should look at them and start to provide verbal praise. Hey, thank you for coming. That's great. Let's go take that bath. So let's talk about now adaptive. So how do I replace the challenging behavior? So think about it. Screaming and crying or tantruming has done two things. Has one, gotten them access to the things they wanted, and two, has gotten them out of things. So the first thing we would say, and again, this is not the best of recommendations, but it's okay for now, is to teach your learner a functional way to say no or not now. So in other words, instead of screaming and crying, maybe they could sign no, they could say stop, they could hand over a card, they could point to an icon on their iPad so that they're, in a sense, they're allowed to remove their own aversion. Now, how do you do that? Well, what you'd want to do is sometimes our learners will engage in what we call precursor behavior. So let's say, for example, you're trying to teach your learner to come to the table, but you also want to teach them that it's okay if they didn't have to. So you might say, hey, come to the table. And at the first sign of discomfort, before the real big challenging behavior occurs, you would immediately prompt them the correct response and say, okay, you don't have to do it. Okay, you don't have to do it. And then what you do is you kind of subsequently teach that across different aversive activities. Now, here's the rub. If you teach your learner to functionally get out of things, then you will always be in a situation where they're always going to be asked to get out of things. And that's just not realistic. So preventatively, adaptively, we would say teach that skill in small little doses, but ultimately we want to teach our learners is how to comply, how to build behavioral endurance, how to be able to sit at the table, how to be able to sit for a full meal, how to be able to go to the bath without kicking and screaming and crying. So what do we say to do that? Well, you shape it in small little doses. You ask these small little things and you provide strong reinforcement and you slowly build up the length, the time, the complexity. Let me give you kind of an example. Let's say you're at Zoom and now you have to do a full half-hour session. That might not be the best interest in your learner and yourself. So what we'd say is, hey, do 5 minutes. 5 minutes, sit down, you interact a little bit, you respond for a few minutes, and then after 5 minutes, You get to leave and you get to go to your reinforcers. The next day it might be 6 minutes. The next day it might be 10 minutes. The next day we might drop it back down to keep some momentum. It might be 5 minutes. And what you slowly do is build momentum. If you think about our lives are this kind of huge chain of behaviors before we get our reinforcement. So that's another way to kind of teach adaptively. Again, these are just our general strategies. I would certainly check in with all other disciplines who might have other cool ways to teach more adaptive skills. So I'm going to leave this off now with Aisha. Do you want to talk about special considerations?
Sure. One special consideration to keep in mind is that the behavior might escalate in intensity and length. We want you to always stay the course if you can. If the behavior continues to persist or increase in an uncomfortable, dangerous manner, please be sure to reach out to any one of us for our help.
Right. And as we go through each one of these contexts, that special consideration will be embedded at the bottom. And again, I just want to say it over and over again for each one of these things. When our behavior is no longer reinforced, it will have a tendency to increase in frequency, duration, intensity. You might see novel behaviors. It's those moments where if you understand what's happening, you will realize it's actually working. It seems very counterintuitive. I can't tell you how many times we've been through these situations where we've explained this, what to do, but without the foresight of explaining it's going to get worse. An hour later, the parent is calling us, going, what the hell did you do? It's getting progressively worse. And we forgot to kind of prep them for it gets worse before it gets better.
This context, we're talking about when your child wants something, you're willing to give it to them, but they're engaging in challenging behavior or they're communicating using challenging behavior. So how did we get here? How did this get learned? And what's the history? So we're going to break this down in the ABC format that we've mentioned in previous letters, where we're going to be talking about what the motivation is, what the signals are, what is the behavior, what are they saying or doing, and what's the payoff. So in this context, your child wants something that they may not have had in a while, that they might see a sibling or a peer playing with, that it might be really preferred for them. And that's building this motivation in them that's gradually kind of growing and becoming a bigger force. And they want it now, but they may have a hard time communicating that. And the signal for that, why are they engaging in this challenging behavior? There might be a parent present, there's a caregiver present, there's a sibling present. And what are they doing? They're engaging in whatever challenging behavior that's in their repertoire, screaming, crying, whatever your child individually engages in. And what's the payoff there? So what we're looking at here is what is the consequence to those challenging behaviors when the motivation is super high to engage in them? Someone is most often going to then provide them attention, come over to them and say, what do you want? What can I give you? Here, please be quiet. I'm on the phone. Take this. Someone's going to provide access to the item that they're asking for, even though they might not have asked functionally, using the appropriate language, or even just using not screaming or not stomping their feet trying to get access to something. Someone might then redirect the learner to something else, or they may try to prompt the request at that moment. But what is the future result there? In this context, the learner is going to engage in that challenge, in that type of challenging behavior in similar contexts in the future because it worked. They were stomping their feet. They wanted the iPad. Their sibling was playing with it. It was loud. It was boisterous. It was disruptive to everyone. So someone gave into it, and that learner now has learned, hey, when I do this, I get what I like. People give things to me. People redirect me. People give me attention. And this is a common kind of loop that it happens probably every day. So now we're going to talk about proactive, reactive, and adaptive strategies on how to work you through this when it happens in the moment. But first, prior to in the moment, we're going to be talking about proactive. What does proactive mean? It means what can you do to change up the environment, to set things up a certain way, to prevent certain things from getting to a 10, kind of getting them, kind of keeping it de-escalated and planning ahead. So first, you're going to want to determine a method for how your child is going to request for things. So at MSA, we have students who are vocal verbal. They're able to speak and say what they need. We have kiddos who have AAC devices. We have students who might sign, do a picture exchange. So it's really important from the proactive perspective to know what is available to your student and to have those expectations be realistic. The next thing is going to be, it's really, really important to determine reinforcers across a wide variety of motivators and motivation across the day. So what we mean by that is if your student is playing with the same thing all day, every day, it's likely going to lose its value. So being aware of a variety of reinforcers throughout the day is going to be really important. And then the next thing we would recommend proactively is practice teaching requests as much as possible naturally throughout the day. There are going to be instances, we know, where you may forget to do that, but that's why we're here. We're just trying to encourage you, kind of plant the seed that every interaction is a learning opportunity and a chance to practice a new skill. Especially one of the most important things is learning how to ask for things that you need. It's one of the basic early phases of language that neurotypical people learn, and it's something that we really focus heavily on in our field because it gives you access to all the things in your environment. So what we mean by practicing teaching requests as much as possible, we mean capture or contrive instances where motivation would be high. So an example, like we do something called man training, which is request training during times where a student might be hungry, like snack time. So if you're working on them asking for snacks or reinforcers that are edibles or things like that, we would recommend finding times in the day where they haven't just already eaten, because they're likely not going to be hungry and the chance that they are going to request appropriately might be lower. Again, ensure that your child wants it. You're not going to have them request something that they're already eating or that they've kind of satiated on. You're going to want to prompt the request. We are recommending that you prompt it. This is not the time for you to wait them out. We want to practice prompting the request and getting an appropriate response out of them. Delivering the reinforcer immediately. It's going to be really important to create that understanding of the contingency there. So if you're prompting a request, that they should get access to that item relatively quickly, because that wait time is then going to also create another context of challenging behavior called waiting, which is really hard. And then fade prompts across opportunities. What we mean by that is if you start to see some momentum, you don't have to prompt every response. We are recommending that you kind of take a step back and see, oh, they're getting it. Okay, the next one I'm not going to prompt, or I'm going to give less of a prompt. For an example, if you're prompting them to request a cookie, the first prompt might be the full word. You're going to say cookie or cookie. And then after a few practice contrived rounds, you might say cook or k, or just having a picture of it. So what we mean by that is just fading how much you're helping them, because the goal of prompts is to reduce them, and just repeat that process. And that's what we would recommend proactively prior to any challenging behavior. We're not recommending these strategies when you're in the thick of it. We're recommending to practice them prior to getting into that challenging behavior situation. Okay, so now you're in it and we're in the reactive phase. So how should I react when my child is engaging in challenging behavior? When they want something, I'm willing to give them, but they're engaging in challenging behavior anyway. So here's what we would recommend. It's really important to stay calm. Look at the learner and say no. If they're engaging in, let's say, screaming, you'd say no screaming. It's important to shift your tone. You don't have to yell at them or reprimand them, but we do recommend that you shouldn't sound the same way that you would if you were praising them. We want there to be a stark contrast. We recommend turning your face and eyes away from the learner. And the reason we recommend that is we don't know in the moment if your attention or what we're doing, your nonverbal language, your body language is maybe giving them a form of attention. So we're recommending to remove that so that we can figure that out.
Right. Can I just jump in there real quick, Marissa? Yeah. So again, I just want to, you'll hear us say a lot, turn your head and don't look. And again, we want to create, why are we doing that? We want to create for the learner a very salient signal that this behavior you're engaging in will no longer get the reinforcer or the payoff. So we want to over extenuate our body, over exaggerate it to provide a very clear signal. Sometimes we've even recommended is putting your hand up, kind of like, talk to the hand, if you will. The hand signals that in the presence of this hand, with my eyes this way and not looking at you, whatever you're currently engaging in will not produce my attention nor access to the reinforcer or payoff in the future. And so anything that you think will help the learner visually associate what you're about to do, by all means do it. You might give them a card. There's multiple things you can do. That's what we mean by don't look away. We mean by look away or turn your face. We want a signal. It's all about creating signals. Currently, right now, we are signals. When they want something, they come to us because we signal the availability of getting a reinforcer. So now when they're engaging in challenge behavior, we have to let them know something is different.
Thank you. Perfect. And I also, I think it's important for us to make the note. It does sound kind of cold that we're saying like, turn your face away and say no. We're not saying that so that you look more powerful or look more, kind of sassy to your student, your kiddo. We're recommending that within reason, like Jimmy's saying. It doesn't necessarily need to be a talk to the hand or a dramatic no. It does just mean that something in their world needs to change to signal that something is different.
If there's any catchphrase for you, it's usually we ignore the behavior, not the behavior. So when we're ignoring something, we're not ignoring an individual. We're not ignoring who they are. We're ignoring or not providing reinforcement to a very particular subset of things they do or say at given moments. So that's very important.
Back into the reactive, another thing that we would recommend is if your child engages in any, challenging behavior in the form of aggression, self-injury, or property harm, do your best to block it. But again, always remember that special consideration we're going to reiterate later. If it becomes too much, please call for help. But this just means, blocking the best that you can. Count to 10 slowly in your head. We recommend that because there needs to be space between the engaging of the challenging behavior and your response, because how you respond is then going to shape that entire interaction. If the challenging behavior persists, just restart that count in your head calmly as best as you can. And after you've waited 10 seconds, we recommend that you prompt the appropriate request, whatever it is, whatever started this or triggered this, in the absence of any challenging behavior. So what that means is if you're trying to get your child to request cookie and they were screaming, we would suggest waiting about 10 seconds that they're not screaming to then prompt them to say cookie and then deliver the reinforcer. What you just did there was you weren't reinforcing the screaming, you were reinforcing not screaming and appropriately asking for cookie. So I hope that makes sense. And the last thing we're going to discuss in this context is how do you replace challenging behaviors with something more acceptable? That's what we would call an adaptive strategy. So determine both naturally occurring and set up opportunities when your child might have motivation for a reinforcer. So examples include, like we were talking about earlier, snack time is a great opportunity to work on asking for food. If you're going outside to play, setting up opportunities for them to ask for maybe the bike or the scooter or a basketball hoop or a toy that's outside. These are all naturally occurring instances where people would ask for things. So you're going to get that natural motivation under those contexts. It's really, really important to remember any wait time between a child requesting something and you delivering it is going to shape the success of that request. Sometimes if a student is asking for something and you're really trying to practice them working on it, it's going to be more effective if you can deliver it to them right away. So do your best to do so, and set up multiple opportunities throughout the day. We know right now things are really crazy and hairy and not as easy as they might be, but we do recommend as much as you can setting up multiple opportunities throughout the day to practice, asking for things, requesting for things when a child is not tantruming, practicing it when they're in a good mood, when you're in a good mood, when you have the environment set up for you, and trying not to reinvent the wheel once they're already tantruming. So that's the recommendation under this context. And I'm going to pass off the special considerations to Aisha.
And a special consideration for this scenario is that the behavior might escalate in intensity and length, but we want you to always remember to stay the course if you can. And if that's not a possibility, please reach out to us and we'll help you through it.
So my child wants something they can have, but now they have to wait. So this is kind of an offshoot of my child wants something, I'm willing to give it to them, but they're engaging in challenging behavior. So if you saw our first kind of clip of this, it'll almost be identical for the reactive part. Okay, so let's talk about how did we get here? How did this get learned? What's the learning history here using our ABC kind of model? So think about it. What's the child's motivation? What happens in the environment? Well, the learner will typically ask for something, right, that you're willing to give them. But you might not be able to get it at that moment, and you might say, wait, or you might do something, you might not move as quick enough to get access to that particular item, which then, in a sense, you're engaging in a behavior which would indicate it's not coming very quickly enough, which then will typically trigger challenging behavior. So you can either say wait, or if you are slow moving toward getting the reinforcer, some of our learners have a very difficult time waiting, which then triggers challenging behavior in the presence of a parent or a caregiver or a sibling or anybody else who is typically correlated with when I have to wait and I engage in challenging behavior, these guys are going to do something that they've done in the past, which typically is someone will rush to get it as quickly as possible. They'll give the learner lots of attention. They'll try to find something even more valuable than the thing they had to wait for. They kind of try to negotiate. They try to explain why they have to wait. And what's the future result of that? The learner what's going to happen in the future is that the learner will never have to wait. The environment will move as quickly as possible so as to avoid these challenging behaviors. And in a sense, the learner will never learn to wait. They'll never learn to tolerate delays in reinforcement. So that's how they come to the table with this. That's our part in this. That's the learning history. So let's talk about some strategies. Let's talk about proactive, reactive, and adaptive strategies. So proactively, what are we going to potentially do to prevent the problem behavior from occurring? So again, these are not an exhaustive list. These are just some general strategies. What we typically, recommend is reaching out to other disciplines who might have some other good resources. We think now you might be in a better place to evaluate whether they would fit for this particular context. Okay, so the first proactive, for those strong preferences, try to be as quick as possible when delivering them. Now again, that's not really realistic, but given the nature of your learner, if they have difficulty waiting, then don't make them wait. So we kind of put that in there as kind of like, a little tongue in cheek, kind of be glib there, because in all reality, life moves at different paces. But if you know this is really typical and triggering for really highly evocative behavior, then try to move a little bit faster to prevent the motivation from building up. Before challenging behavior might occur, provide praise for waiting. So learner says, I want a cookie, like saying, wait, hey, I like the way you're waiting. And as you're saying, I like the way you're waiting, you're moving in the direction to get the reinforcer. So you're acknowledging you're doing something, acknowledging, reinforcing the fact that when you're saying waiting, you're moving. That might help a little bit to kind of with the sting of having to wait. If the wait is going to be longer, provide a visual cue. You could either set a timer, you could do an hourglass, or sometimes what we recommend is giving the learner a card that says wait on it. And the idea behind that is providing a visual representation that in the presence of this card, the reinforcer is coming. And we will try to be as quickly as possible. When we talk about adaptive strategies, what we'll talk about is how to potentially increase that time. And the research is kind of clear on this, that if we just teach kids to wait by time, there's going to hit a critical mass before they engage in some challenging behavior. So what we might talk about is how to incorporate, if the learner has to wait for extended period of times, we might insert things to do. Sure, you can have it. Wait, I need you to wait, but first, can you do this first? If the wait has to be super long. Also, we say to incorporate the daily use of schedules to signal availability of when things can be had. So if your learner likes to ask, likes things at particular, if your learner likes particular things, you can schedule that throughout, throughout parts of the day. The scheduling will indicate when they could have it. Okay. So let's talk about now reactive. Now you're in it. You've told the learner to wait. They are screaming, they're crying, they're rolling all over the floor. How do you react to it? How do you prevent the payoff from occurring? Well, what do we already know about the payoff? The payoff is you're going to get me access to that item when I engage in challenging behavior. So how do you react to it? One, stay as calm as possible. Remember, your facial expressions will be associated with what you're going to do in the future. If possible, now you're going to look at the learner and say, wait, you need to wait. Once you tell them to wait, what I would suggest is maybe holding up your hand. Again, providing this signal, wait. And now when you say wait, you turn and look away. Here's where you want to look at them, tell them what the idea is. You need to wait, hold your hand up, turn this way. And now what you're doing, you're counting. You're counting in your head, nice and slow. 1, 2, 3. If the behavior is still occurring, you reset the count. The idea, like we talked about in another context, is we want to increase the length of time between challenging behavior and the appropriate one. When you're able to get to at least 10 seconds of quiet behavior, hand goes down, you look to the individual and say, hey, I love the way that you were waiting. Here you go. Deliver the reinforcer. Okay? Now, adaptively, what are we teaching the learner? We're teaching the learner to tolerate longer durations before the reinforcer occurs. So that's really, if you think about it, the replacement behavior. So how can you front end this? How can you be more adaptive? What can I do to exchange the problem behavior? Well, if you think about it, the best way to get access to things is waiting without challenging behavior. So if you're able to hear the word wait and not engage in challenging behavior, it will come as quicker than you engage in challenging behavior, and now we have to do this reactive process, which could take a little bit of time. Okay. So adaptive procedures. So if you think about it, how are we going to replace the challenging behavior with more an acceptable one? Well, if you think about it, what's the replacement behavior for challenging behavior in contexts where you have to wait? It's to wait. It's not to engage in the challenging behavior. And while you're waiting, maybe find something else to occupy your time while you're waiting. And that could be just simply waiting. That could be engaging in another leisure activity, or doing something else relative to screaming, crying, or having some type of tantrum. So adaptively, what would we do throughout the day? Well, similar to the situation where we're teaching our learner to have multiple opportunities to ask for things throughout the day, we would determine both naturally occurring and contrived or set up opportunities for where your child might want to ask for something and you can teach them to wait. So we could either capture it, that is, you wait for motivation to biologically and naturally build up. If you haven't had a cookie for a long period of time, that is a naturally way for the motivation for the cookie to build up. Or once you have the cookie, you can now contrive multiple opportunities by breaking the cookie up. Each time I break up the cookie, I have another opportunity to get the learner to both ask for it and to wait. So what we would say is, if you can, try to set time for this. We'd want to teach our learners in little sprints. If you're just capturing things in the moment, it will take a lot longer for your learner to learn how to wait and or tolerate delays, if you will. So if you can, practice this very important skill. So if you have some time, you set aside, you have like your very easily deliverable reinforcers. Why do we say deliverable reinforcers? Because if the reinforcer has a beginning and middle and end, it's easy to deliver. This would be much more difficult to do for open-ended reinforcers like iPad or reading a book. But if it's like doing a puzzle piece or a piece of cookie, I can control the rate, I can control the amount, etc. So the more trials, we would say, the better, right? We want lots of repetition with lots of contrast. Okay, so practicing this, now your learner has a nice demanding repertoire or requesting repertoire. So when they ask for something, what would we say? They ask for something and now we hold up our hand and say, wait, maybe 1 second. Wait, pause. Hey, I like the way you're waiting. Deliver the reinforcer. Set up another opportunity. They say, let's say they say cookie. You go, sure, cookie. Wait. Deliver the reinforcer. The idea is to get some momentum where you can say wait for just for a few seconds. The child doesn't engage in challenging behavior, and then you deliver the reinforcer. And when you're at a comfortable pace, that is, let's say 5 times in a row without challenging behavior, you now might be in a better place to do a few extra seconds, or or a little bit longer for the wait, or make the wait a little bit more natural. So it might be cookie, please. Like, sure, wait. Hey, I like the way that you were waiting. Here's the cookie. God, you do such a great, when you wait, it's amazing. So you can build up the length, you can build up the time, you can build up the more naturalness of what it would look like for any of us when we have to wait. So I'm going to hand it off to Aisha with special considerations.
Special consideration for this context is that the behavior might escalate in intensity and length, and we want you to stay the course as much as you can, if you can. And if the behavior continues to persist, please reach out to any one of us for help and we'll work you through it.
Yeah, that one is a definite. I specifically think in situations where we're going to teach the learner to wait, running this as kind of like your own little mini session will be important. So we've talked about capturing it in the moment, and then this kind of contrived stuff. So again, like we've already mentioned, if you ever want to contact the BSD team, we would certainly set up Zoom sessions with you and take you through some of these more practiced, contrived sessions.
Here we are in our next context, and this is when your child wants something that they just can't have. This is something that I'm sure everyone is familiar with. We come in contact with this all the time, of things that you want that you just can't have. Mine right now is that I want a Peloton. Can I have one? No. So I get it. I'm frustrated about it, but it is the way of the world right now. So how did we get here? How did this get learned? And what's the history? And we're going to break this up in the same format we've discussed before, that we hope you guys are becoming more familiar with, of the ABC format. So we're going to look at what the motivation is there, what are some signals in their environment, what is the behavior, and what is the payoff or consequence. So under this context, how is this learned? And what is the motivation? So your learner, your child was told no for something they wanted, whether it's that they want to go outside, they want the iPad, they want more of something that you might not have anymore. You might have told them, no, you can't have that. That's not yours. They might want something that their peer or their sibling is playing with, or they might want something that's yours that's just not an option. You need your laptop to do work and it's not their time to use it. You also might be, it might be a scenario where they may have had it already. Again, it's something to be thoughtful of, that they just can't have it. It's non-negotiable. It's important to make that distinction. This isn't something that they can wait for. This isn't something that they can have if they ask nicely. The answer is just no. So what are the signals in the environment? Why do our individuals or our learners engage in these behaviors? It's usually because there's a parent, caregiver, or sibling present. So they're going to use challenging behavior to get access to those individuals in their environment because of the payoff, right? So now we're going to be talking about when they want something that they can't have. You told them no. You told them, no, it's not yours. You can't have that right now. Someone then might provide them attention if they start screaming, or if they start crying, or if they start throwing. Someone might give them access to the thing that you originally told them that they couldn't have, because that alleviates the experience for you. You don't have to hear them yelling anymore. You don't have to be afraid that they're going to throw something at you. They might break something. Or you might provide an alternative reinforcer. And what does that mean? What does that do? What does that loop create? Unfortunately, we call that sometimes a behavioral trap. If a kiddo is screaming for something, you've told them no, but you can't handle it and you want them to stop, so you give it to them anyway. It may have alleviated your stress in that moment, but the learner will then do it again the next time around. So always remember that. Things aren't created out of the blue. They happen because of that history and that experience, that is that chain of events there. Okay, so in this context, we're going to now address what you can do proactively. What does that mean? It means what can you do to prevent this or be more proactive in the future? So under this context of which you told them no, they just cannot have it, we would recommend prior to getting into the thick of it or being in the challenging behavior experience, provide access and time to preferred activities and items throughout the day. This means that we're just saying, like, flood them with opportunities to get access to those things that they like to play with, that they want throughout the day, to kind of fill their cup up. We want to create, we don't want to deprive them of anything. We want the motivation for those things to be, it's like giving it away for free. We want them to have access to it throughout the day. Provide alternatives to when saying no or denying access. So for an example, you can always say, I'm really sorry, you can't have the iPad, but you can have this. You can have a coloring book, you can have a game. We want to be cognizant of the fact that no isn't always the easiest answer. It is more thoughtful and caring to say, I'm really sorry, you can't have that right now, and acknowledge that it sucks, but you can have this. So the next thing we would recommend proactively is allow access, but make it contingent or because of something that the learner has to do. So for an example, sure, you can watch Dora, but first you need to do this puzzle. And when we say things like using first then language, that's what we mean by that. So there's this thing called the Premack principle or grandma's law, where it's like, first you need to eat your dinner, then you can have dessert. These are things that neurotypical people are coming in contact all day. I have to go to work before I make a drink after work. I have to work out before I eat an entire cake later. These are the things that are familiar for me right now and are going to be individualized to your learner. But it's important to use that into setting up the experience for your kiddo. So you're not just saying no, you're saying no, not right now, you have to do this first, then you can have it, which is then creating motivation to engage in something appropriate so they can get access to that thing that they want. We then also would recommend removing desired items from the environment. This is a short-term kind of fix. This does not fix this context by any means. By removing things just removes temptation. It's kind of like a Band-Aid intervention. It's also playing into that out of sight, out of mind, saying it's a quick fix, but it's not realistic. You cannot, if you need to have your laptop out because you're working, or you need to have the iPad out because your other child is using it for Zoom, it's not realistic to hide it. So just be thoughtful of that. It's a quick fix, but we wouldn't recommend it as something that you do long-term. Now we're going to move into reactive strategies. So when you're in it, when your child wants something that they cannot have, you've told them no, and they are very upset. How should you react when a child is engaging in challenging behaviors in this context? As always, we're always going to recommend stay calm. It's going to be hard sometimes in the situation to not take it personally and to not get flustered. We try to recommend to pause a second and try to remain calm. Walk away if possible. Just remove yourself from that interaction for a second, take a little break for yourself. And that is going to signal to them something's changing in my environment. The signal that I'm used to, who's giving me the things that I want, is walking away from me because something is different here. Again, always block or remove the reinforcer. If they have it, if they've found a way to get it, do your best to calmly take it away and put it somewhere that they can't have it, because again, that's what they want. And you've told them no. So you don't want to get stuck in that power struggle of like taking it back and forth. Just remove it if you can. Always block aggression, self-injury, or property harm the safest way that you can. We know that sometimes this can escalate, but do your best to kind of safely do that. And we can always offer you suggestions on how to do that. We recommend avoiding eye contact, and that's because in this context, we don't want you to inadvertently reinforce challenging behavior with your eye contact or with your body language. So we recommend that. And also, not making eye contact is an additional signal that something's going to change or something's different. And we would recommend just going about your business. So an example, we had a conversation like this yesterday with a family when a student is engaging in challenging behavior. One parent just walks away and says no, and walks away. And the kid's like, oh, okay, well, he said no, so I'm not going to do it. But the other parent said, well, when I do that, he keeps coming at me and he keeps saying, you know, I want this, and engaging in challenging behavior. And that's because, you know, the parent had recognized, I don't go about my business. I am feeding into it. So we recommended just walk away, go wash the dishes or whatever you were planning on doing, and wait at least 30 seconds of no challenging behavior. Let me reiterate that. Wait at least 30 seconds of no challenging behavior. We say this because we don't want to inadvertently reinforce that challenging behavior. They need time to de-escalate and kind of check themselves, like realizing, oh, what I'm doing is not working. Let me try something different. And redirect the learner to current activities. So if you were in the middle of doing a puzzle, or if they were in the middle of doing work that they're getting from school, you would just either redirect them back to that when they're not engaging in challenging behavior, or move on to another activity, but that isn't giving into what they were asking for. And provide praise if the learner finds something else to do. If they on their own kind of get tired of crying and screaming, which might happen, they may just get over it and move on. They may not. I know there's probably a lot of parents right now who are rolling their eyes being like, they never get over it. But we promise you that if you follow this sort of system, if you go about your business and something in the environment does change, you will notice a shift in your child's behavior. It could get worse before it gets better, like we've highlighted. They may start to pull out new behaviors. They may kind of pull out all the stops, and you might be like, whoa, what is going on here? But we do want to give you comfort in that that's expected, especially if something that's always worked, if screaming has always worked and you've all of a sudden to become neutral to screaming, it's going to get louder, it's going to become a little bit more hard. But we say that's actually better, because when you're at the peak, that means it can only get better from there. Okay, and again, provide praise if the learner finds something else to do. Just to reiterate that, if they've moved on their own and they're no longer crying, and so let's say they were asking for the iPad, you said no, you walked away, they then started playing with another toy, it's going to be important that you do go over to them and praise them for that, because that's ideally a natural situation. If someone tells you no for something, you just move on with your life and do something else. And it's important to connect that you as the parent or the signal in their environment is proud of them for doing that, so that that positive praise or positive reinforcement will then increase the likelihood that they will engage in those alternative activities instead of crying or screaming or whatever their behaviors are. And lastly, we're going to talk about adaptive. So how do you replace these challenging behaviors with something more acceptable? So in this context, again, you told them no, there's no negotiating. The answer is no. So practice saying no to less preferred things during the day to build the momentum and build that skill. As the learner learns no for less preferred things, move on to higher value things. So for an example, if your child sometimes is interested in puzzles, sometimes not interested in puzzles, they're not like a high reinforcer, and they ask you to do a puzzle or they ask you to do something, just say, not right now, no. They might not care so much, but what we're saying is to expose them to no for those less preferred things, for those things that are likely not going to occasion big explosions of challenging behavior. And we say this to then build up their tolerance for no, so that once you get to the big stuff like, no, you can't have a lollipop right now, no, you can't have your iPad right now, that they've come in contact with the word no, and they may be less likely to engage in challenging behavior, and the value of no is significant for them because they know it means something is going to change. I'm not getting access to something, and that's important. Always provide praise when the learner tolerates no. Super, super important. I think sometimes we forget that once we feel like our kiddos learn no, we're like, cool, they got it. We don't need to really praise them for it. But think of it in a simpler terms, like tolerating no for something small is great, but tolerating no, especially right now, like, no, we can't go to school. No, you can't go for a walk whenever you want. No, we can't go to the park. No, we can't go to the grocery store that we went to every day to get ice cream. These are like the big heavy no's that the small no's will eventually build up to being what's important to tolerate. And as always, provide praise and attention to the learner when they find an alternative activity. And this means when they're not already upset, practice this. When you're just throughout the day, if your kiddo goes from one activity to another, just give them a little like, hey, great job. I really liked that you went from playing with your puzzle to going to play with your Legos. Because again, we want them to come in contact with that praise for finding an alternative on their own. And I'm going to pass on the special considerations to Aisha.
So a special consideration for my child wants something that they cannot have is that the behavior might escalate in intensity and length. We want you to stay the course as much as possible, but if it continues to persist, please reach out to the behavior service department and we'll be glad to help you through it.
All right.
How about this scenario? You've kind of identified that it's not, you asked the learner wants something that they can have, or you've said no, or it was a transition, or you told them to wait. A lot of times when we ask families what context what they might, might be in, they'll typically say, I have no idea. It just seemed to occur out of the blue. So as such, we decided to develop guidelines that if you're in this particular context, here's the learning history, and here's how to react to it, be proactive, and teach adaptive skills, which is really what we're going to say is a combination of all the previous situational factors. Excuse me. So how did this get learned? Well, what we've just said before is that it's typically one of the other situational factors. We're just not cognizant of what actually happened. It's either we've kind of, in a sense, said no without realizing that we had or did something in our behavior. It could be that the learner is very sensitive in the environment and they're associating something with a particular transition. It could be that they haven't had a lot of attention. It could be a whole host of those factors. So in a sense, what we don't typically see on our part is that the motivation for attention builds up, the motivation for items or activities builds up, their routines or their patterns have been thrown off that we're not aware of, things might fall out of place, their homeostasis, if you will, gets interrupted, or there might be some subtle signs of the environment is about to change. And usually when there's a parent or caregiver or sibling, or in other words, someone who's been associated with engaging in challenging behaviors around, I usually get the payoff. So what is the payoff? Well, think about it. If something seems to occur out of the blue and you have no idea, you just hear challenging behavior, we typically make it circus time. We run to the individual, we provide attention. We try to ascertain just what's going on. Do you want this? What's going on? Are you okay? So we potentially provide lots of attention, exaggerated attention. Our facial expression kind of changes. So if you think about it, this is a really nice way to bring all the people who are correlated with my reinforcers closer to me. If I scream or engage in challenging behavior, the world will move. And as such, people will come closer and they will fix that which I might not be able to tell them what I want them to fix or change. So what would be the future result in this is that in the future, learners will engage in challenging behavior to bring individuals closer. So let's talk about some of those proactive, reactive, and adaptive strategies if you feel you're in a situation and you have no idea what's going on. Okay, so proactively, how could you potentially prevent that in the future? Well, try to be as cognizant as possible of the contextual or situational triggers for your learner. That is, see if you can somehow identify, was this an accepting no? That is, you told your learner no, or you indicated somehow that you weren't going to reinforce them. Did you somehow indicate to them that they had to wait, or you told them to wait? Has the motivation built up where there's subtle changes in the environment? It'll typically, for these minor kind of challenging behaviors that are not too severe or more problematic, it's probably one of those four contexts. So always try to be aware of it. Even if you still can't identify, we would say we're going to talk about how to react to it anyway. Also know your limits. Before you react, take a deep breath, pause. How you react will determine whether it occurs more likely in the future. And for all intents and purposes, your self-preservation is most important during this time. Pick and choose your battles. You know, like we've said to some the families on Zoom sessions, we will recommend, we will conceptually analyze for you some of these procedures and the principles that account for it. But ultimately, it's what you guys are willing to do. Like we had mentioned earlier, in order to change someone else's behavior, you have to change your own. So there might be times where mentally, physically, psychologically, emotionally, you just might, you might not be willing to engage in some of these reactive or even adaptive procedures because it takes time, it takes effort. So pick and choose your battles. You don't have to be the hero, and that's okay. Practice teaching requests for a wide variety of reinforcers. So actively teaching your learner to use their language, whatever communication system they are, for asking for the things they want, in addition for the things they don't want, will be really important. Increasing language, increasing socialization, access to more leisure items, more choices, the better if you can. And be aware of transitional issues. What are the peaks and valleys of your learner's day where they're asked to move from things? Even just sitting there could be a preferred activity. And if they have to move from something sedimentary to something more active, can be a transition. Think of transitions as movements, right? You're in one environment, you have to go to another. So try to be as best as cognizant as possible. Okay. So what do you do now? How do you react to challenging behavior when you're in it and you cannot identify which are the other situational factors? How am I not going to respond? How am I going to teach the learner that this challenging behavior will not be paid off? Well, the first thing, as always, stay calm. Our learners will really associate body positions, body faces, movements with the availability of reinforcement or not. So we try to be as calm as possible. Why? It's all about providing signals. It's all about signaling to our learners that in the presence of this particular behavior, mom, dad, sibling, grandma, grandpa, Uncle Joe, whoever they might be, when they're calm and they respond this way, this behavior will not have the payoff. So here's what we say. If you're far away from your learner, don't approach, don't go to them. Unless, of course, there is harm or there's the potential for that. If your learner gets hurt and they're screaming and crying, of course, go to them, console them, and do all the parental things and loving things that you would do for anyone. But if they're not hurt or they're not in any particular distress, what we would say is eyeball them and keep a distance. What you don't want to do is go up to them as quickly as possible to reinforce that kind of called behavior, if you will. And that's what we mean. You kind of like pause a little bit, you're kind of eyeballing them, and before you approach, you're trying to assess, what might be the function. If you can get 30 seconds of calm, consecutive behavior, then and only then we would say approach and then try to assess the function. Based upon what you determine and challenging behavior occurs again, then you can just default to one of those things. So you might, your learner is calm, you approach them, you go, hey, and they're calm now, and you're like, hey, what's going on? I want a cookie. Now you can now default to, is the answer yes, you can have the cookie, or is the answer no, challenging behavior, default to those, I just told the learner, no, they can't have something. Okay, but if there is potential for harm, what do we say? Approach quickly as possible, stay within arm's length, block aggression if needed. So here's a situation where you're providing attention, but not as much. So you're keeping your learner very calm, you're keeping them protected, you're trying to keep them safe, try not to make eye contact. Again, this is all for when they're not really hurting themselves. So, but if they do have that potential, you're going up there and you're kind of downgrading it. Wait for 30 full seconds of calm behavior, and then similar to we just mentioned, assess and try to determine the reasons or the function. Okay, easier said than done. Those reactive procedures for all that we've mentioned are not easy because there's the potential that it will get worse before it gets better, and from an emotional perspective, it will elicit a lot of strong parental reactions from your part. If you can stay the course, there is light at the end of the tunnel. It might not seem like it, but there is. I mean, this basic principle we're talking about is extinction, which is the withholding of reinforcement for said set of behaviors. And it's highly, highly, highly effective, but very difficult to do realistically. Okay, so adaptively, what can we teach our learner instead of the challenging behavior. So like we said before, provide a lot of attention and engagement to the learner when they're engaged in activities. What you want that, you want to teach them to do is to how to occupy their own time, how to be able to ask for the things they want, how to play with the toys or interact with the things in their environment. We'd also say adaptively practice the proactive strategies for all other contexts. That is, multiple opportunities to practice requesting for the things you want, requesting for the things you don't want, expanding on language, pairing yourselves with reinforcement, making social interaction a much more valuable reinforcer, allowing your learner more opportunities for self-stimulation, more opportunities for leisure skills, all those kind of things that would help enrich their lives. Now, again, I'm saying this, like, well, just do this and this, but each one of those suggestions would require a little bit more in-depth analysis and a little bit more specific procedures. But we just want to give you some thought of how to kind of be more adaptive, which is the stuff you guys are probably already doing. Okay, so Aisha's going to finish up here with special considerations for it came out of the blue.
Again, families, we cannot stress this enough. So special consideration for these scenarios that the behavior might escalate in intensity and length. We want you to stay the course if you can. If the behavior continues to persist or increase and it becomes dangerous, we want you to reach out to the behavior service department and we'll help you through it.
All right, so let's finish this up. Let's kind of put a nice period at the end of this big paragraph here and end where we left off. So we started this whole newsletter by saying we change other people's behavior by changing ourselves. So we hope that as we went through these different situational contextual factors, you can see that all these proactive, reactive, and adaptive procedures are really behaviors for you to engage in order to change your learners. So let's finish off by reevaluating or going back and reiterating these tips of the week. So again, one, keep in mind that behavior has a function, even if it seems to occur out of the blue. That's going to be the most difficult part to understand, is that things happen for a reason. And we believe that the reasons are in the environment, whether external or internally. That is just the same type of environment within the skin. Pause before you react. What we mean by that is before we have this knee-jerk reaction, pause, take at least 3 deep breaths, and then what you're trying to do within that pause is try to figure out which contextual factor might I be in. Is this an accepting no? Is this a transition? Is this I just told them no? Is this, do they have to wait? If you know the context, and the context and the situation, then you have to determine, am I willing now to engage in the reactive procedures, knowing that it could get worse before it gets better? If the answer is no, you're not willing to do it because you just, for that given moment, you just can't do it, then we would say give in as quickly as possible. Don't draw this out. Pick your battles. Tomorrow is another day. But if you are willing to do it, default back to those basic reactive procedures. Remember, all of the reactive procedures are based upon this principle of not allowing the challenging behavior to get its payoff, or we would say extinction. So that is, if they want attention or access to something, challenging behavior will not get them access, but saying it in an appropriate way, or selecting the appropriate icon, or engaging the particular sign, or whatever your alternative communication system might be. If it's to get out of a demand, challenging behavior is not going to allow you to postpone it or get out of it. Completion will be able to get you out of it. If it's because you want something, the answer is no, we're going to teach you that problem behavior just because the answer is no. Challenging behavior is not going to get you access to that. And in a sense, what you learn is the word no means you're going to have to tolerate that. And what do we mean by you have to tolerate it? Challenging behavior doesn't produce a payoff. And as a result, when someone tells you no, you are much more likely now to find something else on your own. And the last one is waiting. And so what's the payoff for when you're engaging in challenge behavior when you're waiting? The environment moves faster. So what's the alternative is when people ask you to wait, don't engage in challenging behavior, occupy potentially your time with something else, be able to wait without challenging behavior. Why? Because when you wait, it will come quicker than engaging in challenging behavior. So we would also want you to know is that during these episodes, if it gets really uncomfortable for you, please reach out to the behavior service team. You can Zoom us, you can call us, and we'll kind of coach you through some of those scenarios. Lastly, if you are in a context where it doesn't fit one of these situational contexts, because that could be the case, we certainly didn't talk about self-stimulatory behavior or behaviors that remove their own aversion, like anxiety kind of things. Definitely contact the behavior service team in addition to your child's educational team, and we can come up with a more in-depth analysis, a more specific intervention, and work you through that. So as always, I'm Jimmy O'Brien.
I'm Marissa Eck.
And I'm Aisha Lee.
And thanks for attending this newsletter.
Thank you guys. Have a good
Bye.
one.